let's look at our stocks. Holy cow, stocks are up. Look at that. Wow. All right, so that's the good news. Let's open our comments and get you the show that you deserve. Damn it, you deserve it. Boom, 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 boom. Bum, 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 bum. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the highlight of human civilization. It's called Coffee with Scott Adams, and you've never had a better time. But if you'd like to take this experience up to levels that nobody can even understand with their tiny, shiny human brains, all you need for that is a cup or a mug or a glass, a tankard, chalice or stein, a canteen, jug or flask, a vessel of any kind. Fill it with your favorite liquid. I like coffee. And join me now for the best part of your day, the simultaneous sip, and it's happening now. Go. Oh, so good. All right. Well, let's see if there's any science about coffee. Oh, yes, there is. Some new research, according to SciPost and Eric Nolan, shows that decaf coffee can, not always, but it can mimic caffeine's effect in habitual drinkers. In other words, if you have decaf, your body might register it a lot like caffeinated coffee. Now, do you know who knew that before the science? Pavlov. That's basically Pavlov's dog, right? So Pavlov was training his dogs, and you give them a treat after he rang the bell, and then eventually he could just ring the bell and they would salivate. Well, that's what this is. That's what decaf is. Decaf is just ringing the bell without the actual caffeine as the payoff. I'm pretty sure any hypnotist would have known that not every time and not for every person, then it's not gonna fix your caffeine headache if you haven't had real caffeine. But then every once in a while you can have decaf and it gives you the same little kick as if you had the real thing. And even if you know, it doesn't make any difference if you know that you're getting decaf. I have used this trick on myself many times, where I would give myself decaf because I had too much caffeinated stuff that day. And sure enough, I would feel as though I was getting a little boost. So there's a little trick for you. According to the Washington Times, Trump is no longer interested, or at least he's not exhibiting interest, in going to Fort Knox to find out if the gold is still there. Do you remember when Elon Musk and Trump were both saying, maybe we should check to see if that gold is still in Fort Knox? Well, that interest seems to have waned because nobody cares about it anymore. And the reason given is that apparently it gets audited on some kind of a regular basis, so they do know that the gold is there. To which I say, that's one possibility. One possibility is that they know for sure the gold is there. What's the other possibility? That they know for sure the gold is not there. So if you want to keep your suspicions alive, go ahead, keep your suspicions alive. Although probably it's all there. Well, over in China, they've developed a giant salmon farming ship so that they can raise salmon inside the ship, basically like a fish farm. And it's better than using a regular fish farm, which would be in one place and maybe a typhoon would get it, or there's some other kind of problem that can destroy your fish. But if you put it in a big old ship, I guess you have access to all the water you need, and you can make yourself some salmon. So I like that idea. Salmon farm in a ship. Some say it's going to be crappy salmon because they would feed it substandard food, but they don't have to. I mean, the possibility is they could feed it good food and then your salmon would be fine. But we'll see if that becomes a thing. According to the University of Cologne, which I can smell from here, parents, this will surprise absolutely nobody. Can you believe it? Parents are not happier, but have a greater sense of meaning in life, according to a study. Now, how many of you didn't know that? If you've ever seen any parent trying to get their kids to school or get them to do their homework or get them to do anything, they don't look like they're super happy. But if you were to ask them, are you glad you had kids? Well, nearly 100% would say, yeah, it's the best thing I've ever done. You should do it too. So yes, having children is not about having a bunch of laughs. It's about a greater sense of meaning in life. I feel like every parent already knew that. Is there anyone who doesn't know that? Probably the most well-known and understood phenomenon in all the world. Well, the UAE, United Arab, what's the E? United Arab E. Anyway, the UAE is giving every single resident free ChatGPT plus the good stuff for every resident. I saw this on a Mario Nawful post on X. News9 is the source. And it's the only country doing that. And it's part of their push to be the high-tech sort of hub of the world. That's pretty good. So everybody will have ChatGPT in the UAE. I wonder if any other country will follow that model. Did you hear the story? You may have heard the story about the OpenAI. This is also ChatGPT. One of their models allegedly disobeyed the human instructions and tried to sabotage the shutdown mechanism. Did you see that story? Well, it did not surprise me to find out that there's a report today that was not the regular ChatGPT in a regular setting, but rather they were doing safety testing. So it was an artificial condition safety testing. It wasn't something that could have happened in the real world. So probably that's not really something you need to worry about. And I don't see how it could possibly change its own code or, there was something about that story that sounded a little sketchy. Yeah, Owen knew it. Owen was all over that. It just didn't sound true, did it? So I was pausing on that story a little bit. But if I mentioned it, I should not have. Well, Kamala Harris was over in Australia giving a speech at a big event there, and the clips from it are hilarious because she was in full word salad Kamala Harris mode. And honestly, I couldn't tell if she was drunk or stupid. A lot of people said, well, probably both. She does look drunk and stupid, but is it possible she's just stupid? Like really, really stupid? Because I'm giving her the benefit of a doubt that she's drunk. But my God, is she embarrassing? Oh my God. And she could have been our president. Every time you see her talk, you think to yourself, oh my God, She was within striking distance of being the president of the United States. Wow. Speaking of other losers, Mayor Karen Bass of LA, she posted on X that homes are under construction throughout the Palisades ahead of expectations. And then there was a little video from above of a house being built. And I said to myself, this is kind of strange. If your claim was that houses, plural, are being built, don't you think that your evidence would be more than one house? Doesn't that strike you as odd? If you were trying to say, yeah, a lot of houses are being built, wouldn't you show more than one? And then I look at the comments. Apparently it's one house. Exactly one house. No, I don't know if it's one house, but she's definitely full of shit. There are some things happening, and there are some action, and there are some things moving in the right direction. But if you were to drive there, it might not look like anything's happening. Anyway, she says they've taken action to cut the red tape and expedite the permits. But she's going to get destroyed in the comments to that. All right. Good luck there, Mayor Karen Bass. Did you know that, according to the Daily Wire, the Treasury officials in the U.S. Are doing a good job of choking off the cash flow to the cartels? So they're figuring out what money flowing through the U.S. is cartel money, and they're shutting it down and sanctioning it and making sure that individuals are not getting it. And I said to myself, wait a minute, are you telling me that we always had the ability to know what was the cartel's cash, and it took until Trump's second administration to start shutting it down? Wait, what? How isn't that a little bit fishy? It does seem to me like Trump is the first person who's taken anything serious about Mexico or the border. Just hold that in your head, that the Treasury had the ability to identify the cartel's money flow, and we were not messing with it. How in the world is that even possible, that we weren't doing anything about it until now? The only thing I can imagine is that we were complicit, and something about the Trump administration has decided not to be complicit. I don't know. There's something to be learned by that story, but whatever it is, it's not good. But it's probably good now. Anyway, there's a story in the New York Times that is just full of anonymous sources. Oh man, they got some anonymous sources. And I saw Greta Van Susteren was mocking them for their anonymous sources. But the story is that Trump is backing away from sanctions on Russia because he wants to do business deals with them, meaning America wants to do business deals with them. Now, do you think that's true? And all they have are anonymous sources? What have I taught you about anonymous sources? Anonymous sources have basically no news value because they're usually made up. So it doesn't matter if it's the New York Times, if it's full of anonymous sources. Well, I don't know about that. But it does seem that Germany, France, this is another related news. So that I saw this on Mario Naufel's posts. The source is CGTN, whatever that is. But it says that Germany, France, and the UK and the US have given Ukraine the green light to fire missiles with no range cap. In other words, go ahead, Ukraine, and just start lighting up Russia itself. That means that Ukraine will be striking targets deep inside Russia. Do you think that's, first of all, true? I don't know if it's true because it's not coming from a news source I've ever heard of. But probably it's true. I mean, it feels, maybe it's a little too on the nose, but it feels like the only thing that Europe could come up with is, all right, if Moscow and Russia are, cranking it up and they're not talking about peace, let's just start sending missiles into the heart of Russia. What could go wrong? Well, a lot could go wrong, but it kind of makes sense that they might loosen up the distance cap. So I guess we'll have to watch and see if Russia gets lit up with these new missiles and if it makes any difference at all, or does it make Russia just twice as aggressive? So we're going to find out. Now, what do you think is true? Do you think that there are two stories about Putin right now? One is that he felt under attack by NATO, and that really he's acting in a semi-defensive way by making sure that NATO doesn't surround him, and that Ukraine had always been the red line, and we crossed the red line, so you got to expect it. The other version of Putin is that he plans to dominate all of Europe, and this is just one more step in doing that. Now, they can't both be true, right? It can't be true that he's defensively attacking Ukraine, but he's also looking to roll over and control all of Europe. Or CGTN is China's state TV, somebody says. Is that true? Well, that would make a difference, wouldn't it? Yeah. So I guess the best take about the anything about Ukraine is that we can't tell what's true. So that, I guess that's where I'll settle on this. We just don't know what's true. But we'll see if any missiles are going into the heart of Russia. Well, Jake Tapper was on Piers Morgan, and he's still talking about his new book that talks about Joe Biden's mental decline. And apparently, Jake Tapper has admitted that the Democrat cover-up of Biden's cognitive decline might be worse than Watergate. I guess in his book, he said it wasn't worse than Watergate, but now he's willing to admit, yeah, it might be worse than Watergate. What do you think? Is the cover-up of Biden worse than Watergate? Yes. Yes, by a mile. It's not even close. And not only that, but the Democrats have done lots of things that are worse than Watergate. It's not like the first thing that's worse than Watergate. When I think of Watergate, it just seems so tame. Like, imagine if the worst thing that was happening in the United States was Watergate. If that were the worst thing happening, I'd be pretty darn happy. Stocks would be up. Everything would be good. Here's something I want to add to the whole Biden brain cover-up. Now, most of you are probably under the opinion that everybody in the news business were completely aware that Biden's brain wasn't working, but they were just pretending they didn't know. I'm going to modify that a little bit. I don't think that's totally true. And here's why. Have you ever seen the psychology experiments where they'll have a small group of people, and they'll be asked to look at something and say, let's say, what line is longer than another line, or just some basic factual thing. And only one person will be an actual subject of the experiment, and all the rest will be participants who know that they're participants and they're lying. And what happens is you can somewhat easily make the person who is the real subject believe whatever the other people all believe is true. So it's so easy to change a person's perception until they don't see something, or they do see something that just isn't there. Now, this is a very repeatable experiment in psychology, and you've probably seen it a million times in the real world. So here's my take. For sure, no doubt about it, there were people in the news business. Sorry, I gotta make an adjustment there. For sure, there were people in the news business who were aware that Biden's brain wasn't working and that it was a big problem. There's no doubt about it. I don't know if Jake Tapper was one, but maybe, maybe. But if you have enough people who are pretending that he's perfectly fine, and there certainly were enough people pretending that, then you can guarantee that some number of people were just sort of hypnotized into believing it was true, because when they looked at the other people, they weren't seeing anything that's a problem. So my guess is that it was always a combination. It was a combination of people who knew they were lying and just were trying to prevent Hitler from coming into office, in their view. Some people who just preferred the Democrats to win, that would be the Democrats. And some people who had the ability to know, but that ability was sort of shut off by the fact they were put in an environment where it seemed like nobody else noticed. In theory, they would be cognitively blinded to the obvious. So I think you have to be a little bit careful about assuming that every single person was aware and knew it because you could see it. Because if you were not in that environment, then you would not have been influenced by it, and you could just see it clearly, right? If your experience was turning on my podcast every morning and listening to me say, since maybe 2017 or something like that, saying, no, Biden's brain is completely broken, he's obviously incompetent. If you were listening to me say it every day, you would be completely immune from the cognitive blindness, because you would have at least one person, and probably lots more, who are telling you the truth. So you wouldn't have that problem. But when you look at the Democrats, they would definitely have that problem of being cognitively blinded by their own team, who were lying, basically. Well, were there other examples where they were cognitively blinded? Yes. What about the fine people hoax? Do you think every single person on the mainstream media, do you think every one of them thought that the fine people hoax was real? No. No. There were undoubtedly smart, influential people who knew somewhat early on that wasn't true, but they had an interest in acting like it was true. Now, again, take an innocent Democrat and put him in that situation where all these important people are pretending, they're lying, but they're pretending that the fine people hoax was true. Same problem. They would come to believe it was true because all these important, influential people said it was true. Same with Elon Musk's Nazi salute, which was, of course, not a Nazi salute. Do you think it was even possible that people with normal brains thought that was a Nazi salute? Well, if you have enough people who are the credible people, the ones you trust, and they all seem to say it was, which was the case. Now, they were all liars. Probably the people who, the prominent ones, probably just a bunch of liars who didn't want, Trump and Elon to have power. But I'll bet you, some large percentage of Democrats who would have been perfectly capable of knowing that certainly wasn't a Nazi salute. I mean, you would have an IQ of 80 and you knew that wasn't really a Nazi salute, but you would have been cognitively blinded by your own side because they kept saying it was. So if everybody you talk to says it was, well, suddenly you start thinking, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was. Right. So it wouldn't even be unusual that people were cognitively blinded about Biden's brain. It would be the normal operating system of just how everything works. As long as the people in charge were lying in the same way, then the people who weren't powerful and were just sort of on the same team would believe it was true, and they would believe it easily, even though it was obviously not true. Well, here's one of my favorite stories. Speaking of Jake Tapper, he was on Scott Galloway's podcast, and he was talking about his son. I guess he's got a 15-year-old son, and he was talking about it in the context of the Democrat Party and the Democrat messaging. So he talks about his son was, a football player, and he wanted to grow up and be a cop. So he's 15, and that's his goal. And apparently, because he wanted to be a cop, the people around him, his friends, have decided he must be a racist. And what? He wants to be a cop because he thinks that's the best way to help people, and therefore his friends think he's a racist because he wants to be a cop? And so Jake Tapper is saying, quote, "You're deciding he's a racist because he wants to be a cop? And why does he want to be a cop? He wants to be a cop because he wants to help people, and he thinks that's the best way he can help people." And that's how the Democratic Party talks to men, not just white men, but men. And then Jake goes on. He says, "The idea that he wants to be a policeman and therefore he's racist, my son." And that was the big laugh. And then I got dragged in the comments and all that stuff. And I thought to myself, this is why you fuckers are losing elections. So does Jake Tapper understand what's wrong with the Democrat Party? Yup. Now, I can't name names, but I'm going to tell you that there's at least one other person who's a big name in the media business who had the same enlightened response, meaning that it's one thing to support the Democrats until you have a son, and then it becomes impossible if you have a white son. So he's the second person I know of who had a white son, and he realized, holy fuck, the Democrats are against my own son. So I think that Jake is actually kind of brave to say this out loud, and it's important. So, whatever you think of his other opinions and what he should have known and what he should have said sooner, and those are all fair criticisms. Does he now understand? Does he understand what the problem is? Yes. Yes, he does. very clearly. Because when it comes home like that, you're not talking about the news, you're talking about your son and the trouble he's going to have in society. That's some reality coming home. So there's that. But let's see, are the Democrats planning to do anything about this problem? Well, turns out yes. Yeah, the Democrats have a plan. According to the New York Times, this is going to sound like I'm making it up. So I'm going to tell you in advance, I'm not making this next part up. This is actually real. According to the New York Times, the Democrats are going to spend $20 million on a project they call, quote, Speaking with American Men, a strategic plan. They will, quote, study the syntax, language, and content that gains attention and vitality in these spaces. Above all, we must shift from a moralizing tone. Are you getting close? No. Could the Democratic Party spend about 1 minute talking to fucking Jake Tapper to find out what the problem is? Hey, Jake, could you please explain to these fucking idiots what the problem is? And if you're not going to, I refer you to Fisher King, which is a account on X. You should be following, by the way, Fisher King, Fischer, King. And he commented on this. He says, if Democrats want to win over young men, particularly white men, they need to stop actively hating them. Okay, now we're getting closer. Was it a problem with the syntax in their spaces? Or is it that they're actively fucking hating them? Which one do you think is the problem here? Because they need to stop actively hating them. Demeaning them, yes, and putting up roadblocks, such as affirmative action, DEI, sensitivity training, in the path of their success. It's not about, quote, the tone. And then Fisher King follows up by saying, he says, of course, this will not happen anytime soon because the coalition they've assembled won't have it. They're like the bar scene in Star Wars. Now, compare that level of analysis, which of course is perfect, to we're going to spend $20 million to study the syntax, language, and content that gains attention and vitality in these spaces. Well, why don't you give the $20 million to Fisher King, because he just solved your whole fucking problem. But you're going to ignore it because you're the bar scene from Star Wars. All right, now, is the problem that politicians are uniquely unable to understand the public? Is that the problem? Do you think it's just that politicians are not good at understanding things? Well, here's a story from today about Trump. So I'm just going to read one thing that Trump is saying, and you tell me who understands the public, right? Trump does a truth, and he says that he's considering pulling $3 billion from Harvard and giving it to trade schools across the country. Any questions? Trump wants to pull $3 billion of taxpayer money from Harvard, which is a cesspool of discrimination, and put it in trade schools, which would be really good for men, other people too. Now, is there anything you don't understand about that? No, you understand that perfectly. Is it right on point with what that entire demographic is looking for and wants? Yes, it is. It's right on point. Does it treat them like children? No. Does it treat them like people who want to contribute and make a difference and be successful in life? Yes, it gets everything right. It's not a problem with politicians. It's a problem with politicians who can't do this. All right, I think I made my point. I've been following on X Matt Van Swal, who's doing a great job of talking about the DOGE situation. Here he summarizes it this way: DOGE is literally one of the most popular government initiatives in history. 73% of Americans say they support cutting government waste. Trump brought in the smartest man on earth to do it, and then the left destroyed Elon for it, and the GOP won't vote on it. I can't believe this. And then Elon responded to the post. 3 words: did my best. Whew. Wow. There's almost nothing I can say about that. You know, you probably heard me early on in the DOGE process, and I was saying, I love everything DOGE is trying to do, but when it gets to Congress, they're just going to spend his savings. But it's even worse than that. They're never going to even codify the savings. Not the Democrats, not the Republicans. They're not even going to vote on it. So all that work, all that sacrifice that Elon Musk did to get that right, Congress is going to shit on it. And I'm almost losing my mind that we can just watch this happen. Now, it's not everybody. Marjorie Taylor Greene is trying to get it codified, etc. But the fact that all that effort, it looks like, some portion of it anyway, is going to be thwarted by your own Congress, is such a tragedy. It's almost impossible to understand. It's like we're running as fast as we can toward a cliff, and we even have the smartest people in the world trying to prevent it, and even that doesn't help. What is going on here? What is going on? Well, in other news, do you ever have one of these situations where there's something that you just assumed was always true, and then suddenly one day you realize or you hear something and you go, wait a minute, that couldn't have been true. So here's an example of that for me. So for years and years and years, I've been hearing that one of the reasons that Harvard and some of the other Ivy Leagues have a lot of foreign students is what? Do you know the answer? Why is it that Harvard and a lot of other Ivy Leagues have a high percentage of foreign students? You know the answer too, right? Everybody knows the answer. The answer is that the foreign students were paying full price, full tuition, and so they'd make more money over the foreign students, right? Just obvious. Now, as I tell you too often, I have a degree in economics, and I've got an MBA from a top school, and I would hear that, and I'd say to myself, oh, okay, well, that explains everything. And then one day, which was just recently, I just realized what an idiot I am. So here's the assumption you have to make for this to be true. Are you ready for this? If you also believe that was true, here's the assumption that you and I both made. We made the assumption that if these foreign students didn't come in and pay full tuition, that the seats would be empty. That the seats would be empty. because they wouldn't be able to find a bunch of Asian American people who desperately wanted to go to Harvard but got turned away because they were Asian American, or that all the white students who knew exactly what Harvard cost and they were applying but they got turned away because they were white, that they wouldn't fill those spaces. Obviously they might have needed, some financial support, etc. But it couldn't have possibly been true. It couldn't possibly have been true that Harvard would lose money if they said, well, the rest of these seats have to be full tuition, and they couldn't find enough Americans who had a 4.5 average and had participated in every possible, thing that you need, that wouldn't be willing to pay whatever it took to get a Harvard degree. I've been laughing at myself for a few days. What an idiot. What a frickin' idiot I was. Why did I ever imagine that was true? Now, the actual truth, I think, is a little deeper. I don't know what it is, actually. But some people said that the foreign students' parents were maybe making large donations. I don't know how universal that was. Other people said, no, it's the real game here is to educate foreign people who have become leaders in their own country. So really, it's how the U.S. government controls other countries in the long term by educating them in Harvard. To which I say, really? Sending them to the heart of communism? The heart of communism, and then sending them home with a Harvard degree is going to help America somehow? That doesn't really track. Then other people were saying, Scott, the foreign students were also getting discounted tuition. To which I say, what? What? Well, now I'm really confused. So I don't know exactly what's true. I just know that I was a freaking idiot, an idiot, for imagining that those Harvard seats were going to sit there empty because we didn't fill them with foreign students paying full tuition. Is anybody having the same reaction that I had when I first thought of it? Is anybody saying, oh, I just sort of assumed that was true. I didn't really think about it that much. No, it couldn't have been true. It never could have been true. I don't know what is true, but it's definitely not that. Anyway, is there any other news about Harvard that makes Harvard look stupid? Oh, yeah. Again, I have to tell you before I tell you the story, I'm not making it up. This is an actual story in the news. According to the Daily Mail, Harvard just fired a professor after finding that she fabricated research used in studies on dishonesty. So Francesca Gino, she was considered a star business professor at Harvard, and she'd been doing, I guess she'd been doing studies, more than one study. I guess there were at least 4 studies she did about honesty, and she had allegedly falsified. She lied on her studies about lying. Oh my God. And she was like a star professor. Oh my God. I swear I didn't make that up. Well, Dan Bongino is giving us a little update on X about what's going on there. And he said that he made the decision to either reopen or push additional resources into investigating 3 specific cases he mentioned. Number 1, the DC pipe bombing investigation. You know how it seemed like nothing was happening with that DC, that was the January 6th, who put the pipe bomb there? Because that all looked really suspicious. So that's good. I'm glad that he's putting some resources behind that. The next one is the cocaine discovery at the White House. Really? Dan? How many of you give a shit about the cocaine discovery at the White House how many years ago? Does anybody care about that? Is that where you want your tax money to be spent? Do you want the FBI to go look into who left a bag of cocaine? I have so little interest in that. Now, I assume that's purely political, and I don't mind that political stuff gets done, but why are you wasting our money on a bag of cocaine, even in the White House? So, Dan, why in the world are you spending time and money on that? Like, what could come of it? Like, what's the upside? Is the upside that we get one person in trouble for some drugs? What is the upside? Now, I understand the upside of looking into that DC pipe bombing. I mean, that's a pretty big upside because we could find out something that really matters, and I think the country cares. But really, the bag of cocaine, just because it was a big headline story, how about no? How about you just don't waste my money on that? It's bad enough that the Congress is not going to vote on DOGE, but you're gonna consciously waste my money on that? One bag of cocaine that somebody left? God, I could not be less interested in that. And the other one is the leak of the Supreme Court Dobbs case. Well, I think they do need to understand where the leaks come from, but I don't know if they can find it. Anyway, I saw a comment on X from retired Colonel Doug McGregor. Now, it means more because he's a retired combat professional. And he said this about peace in Ukraine. He said, "In all honesty, I do not believe there's a chance for a deal with Russia and Ukraine at this point." He says, "If you're Zelensky, the worst thing that could happen to you is for troops to come home." You know where this is going. He says they are likely to find him and kill him. If he ends the war, he's the target. The lives lost on the battlefield exceed 1 million, and the wounded are 1 to 1.5 to 2 times that number. Now, does that opinion sound familiar? That's my opinion. My opinion is if Zelensky entered the war, he would personally be killed, so that we don't have any option for peace as long as he's in power. So, and it makes a difference when I hear from Colonel McGregor, because he's got a deeper understanding of how the troops would feel in a case like that. But I agree, absolutely. I have a correction to make. I don't know the exact details, but I think my part of it was wrong. I told you about Gaza, and I told you that the U.S. contractors were going to handle the aid and the food for the Gaza residents who were being relocated into 1/4 of Gaza, so that the rest of it could be cleared of Hamas, I guess. And I mistakenly said that the U.S. was paying for that foreign aid. I think it's only true that U.S. contractors are managing the aid, but probably being paid to do it. That makes them contractors. But it doesn't look like America necessarily was paying for the aid. I don't know who is. Well, I saw Zuby on the X platform talking about some statistics about single moms. And he noted that the USA has the highest rate of children living in single mother households. were about triple the global average. So 23% of USA households have a single mom. And Zuby asks, why do you think that is? Does anybody have an idea? Why do you think that the U.S. has the highest rate of children living in single mother households? And the answer is because it's an option. That's it. That's the whole reason. If it's an option, people will take it. And the better the option is, the more likely they'll take it. Now, in my own example, I have twice married single moms who had stepkids. Now, do you think that that happens as easily in other countries? Do you think that in every country in the world, a single mom with two kids can easily get married or remarried? Probably not. Probably there are huge cultural disadvantages. Do you think that it would be easy for a mom to get divorced in every other country? Probably not. Do you think that the woman has maybe a job that pays, whether before she gets divorced? Well, not in every country, but in the U.S., a little bit more likely. So there's a whole different story in the Black community in the U.S. where the rate is even higher. It's like 50%. And I'm not going to pretend I know what the dynamics are there, but maybe it has something to do with government support. Maybe there's just a little bit more government support going on. But generally speaking, things happen because there's incentives, or because there are options, or because it's possible. That's it. If we were in a country where getting divorced was sort of the end of your life, it just wouldn't happen as much. But we live in a country where people make it work. I mean, it's not easy, but they make it work. They have possibilities. They have options. So if their husband is, drinking or not getting it done one way or the other, they have options. So I don't think it goes. I think there's no mystery to it whatsoever. In science news, surgeons are apparently getting some kind of special glasses that can look at medications, and it will tell them if it's a big mistake to give this medication to this specific patient. So we're talking about literally picking the wrong stuff or something that maybe doesn't work with some other stuff. And it doesn't store the data, so it's not doing anything privacy-wise. But basically, if they pick up the medication, the glasses will look at it and it will tell them, oh, don't use that stuff. So they're still waiting on FDA approval, but the technology has been tested and it works. NBC News is reporting on that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that are the stories that are. Yeah, those are the stories for today that are worthy of your time. Thanks for joining. And did you all see the video of French President Macron's wife pushing him in the face before he exited the airplane in Vietnam? I'm still waiting to figure out what that was all about. But on the other hand, it's sort of none of our business, because whatever that was, it was personal. It wasn't a state issue, but it was funny. I guess that's my only comment about it. It was kind of funny. We don't know anything else about it. All right, that's all I got for now. I'm going to talk to the people on Locals privately. The rest of you, I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for joining. Locals, I'm coming at you privately in 30 seconds.